The bullet sliced through the air, so fast I didn't even hear it. Just felt the shockwave brush past my cheek as my baby's stroller jerked backward. My wife screamed, neighbors ducked, and for a split second the whole street froze in disbelief. Standing on her porch, HOA Karen still had the gun raised, her hands trembling, her eyes wide like she couldn't believe she'd actually pulled the trigger. My baby let out a terrified cry that ripped through my soul. I lunged forward, heart pounding, every instinct in my body screaming to protect my child. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Karen was aiming again, and she was aiming directly at my baby. I shouted for everyone to get down, but before I could reach the stroller, my wife stepped forward, calm, steady, eyes focused like a predator. Karen had no idea who she had just provoked. Before I take you into the full story, I want you to do one thing for me. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I always love seeing where my viewers across the USA are tuning in. Texas, Florida, New York, California. It means the world to me that you're here. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button before we begin. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Today's story, it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to relive. It's about fear, shock, betrayal, and the moment I realized that even the quietest neighborhoods can hide the most dangerous people. Everything started on what should have been the most peaceful morning of my life. My wife and I were just taking our newborn for a simple walk. Nothing special, nothing unusual. The sun was warm, the street was quiet, neighbors were out trimming their gardens, just a normal suburban day. But sometimes that's exactly when disaster strikes, when you feel safe, when you least expect danger. Because on that morning, one woman, our HOA Karen, decided that our baby somehow broke the community rules. And instead of talking, instead of warning, instead of even arguing, she chose violence. She chose to pull the trigger. She chose to aim at a child who hadn't even learned to crawl yet. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was the woman standing beside that stroller. My wife, a woman who has spent years training some of the most elite marksmen in the country. A woman who does not panic, who does not freeze, and who does not miss. So sit tight, because what happened next changed our entire neighborhood forever. It started like one of those mornings you wish you could freeze forever, the kind where the world feels soft, the sunlight feels warmer than usual, and even the breeze seems to whisper that life is good. My wife, Emily, had just settled our newborn son, Noah, into his stroller. He was wrapped in a tiny blue blanket, his favorite one, the one with the stitched little stars that my mother had made before she passed. His tiny fingers gripped the edge of the fabric as if he already knew. It gave him comfort. I still remember the way Emily smiled at him, that soft, motherly smile filled with a love so natural it could have calmed storms. For a moment, nothing else existed, just my family, the quiet street, and the feeling that everything was exactly as it should be. Our neighborhood was the kind people fought to get into. Clean sidewalks, manicured lawns, street trees that lined up like soldiers guarding peace. Families walked their dogs, kids rode their bikes, retirees waved from their porches. It was safe. At least we thought it was. And maybe that false sense of security is why the danger felt so unreal at first. The first sign something was off happened when we reached the corner where the HOA bulletin board was posted. Someone had taped a new notice to it, crookedly, angrily. The corners were torn, like whoever put it up had been shaking. Emily leaned closer. "Oh God, really?" The paper said in all caps, "No babies allowed in public community pathways until they are at least 1 year old. HOA rule." I frowned. This wasn't here yesterday. "It wasn't here this morning," Emily said. "I walked past this when I took out the trash." I didn't have to guess who put it there. Only one person in our neighborhood had the audacity to invent rules that weren't voted on, weren't legal, and weren't sane. HOA Karen, real name. Carla, but nobody dared call her that, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She was the kind of woman who policed grass height, with a ruler who took pictures of kids chalking the sidewalk and threatened to report them for defacing property, who once called animal control, because a neighbor's dog looked suspicious. A baby not being allowed on a public sidewalk? That was a new level, even for her. Emily sighed, clearly annoyed but trying not to let it ruin her morning. Let's just ignore it. She can't enforce this. Yeah, I agreed. She can't even enforce her own personality. Emily giggled and squeezed my hand. For a moment, things felt normal again as we kept walking down the shaded part of the block. But deep down, somewhere under the calm surface, something inside me felt unsettled. A few minutes later, just as we were passing the row of rose bushes Mrs. Lawrence always tended to, I noticed someone peeking over a hedge. The eyes were sharp, unblinking, and filled with something I couldn't quite place. Anger? Anxiety? Hatred? It was Karen. She snapped her head back behind the bushes the moment I made eye contact. Emily didn't notice. She was busy adjusting Noah's blanket, but I felt the hairs on my arms rise. Something was wrong. Something was brewing. We kept walking, trying to enjoy the morning, but halfway through our route, as we passed a house that had a welcome spring, flag swaying gently in the breeze, Karen suddenly appeared from behind her garage like she had been waiting for us. She stepped directly into our path. Her hair was messy, like she'd been pulling at it. Her blouse was wrinkled, her hands twitchy. She wasn't her usual bossy, condescending self. This was different. Her eyes darted between me, the stroller, and Emily. "You can't walk him here," she said sharply, pointing at the stroller with a shaking finger. "You're breaking the rules." Emily blinked in disbelief. "What rule?" "The rule I posted this morning." Karen snapped. "Babies under 1 year old are prohibited from using community pathways. They make noise. They invite danger. They disrupt property values." I almost laughed. "He's literally asleep." "Doesn't matter," she yelled, taking a step closer. "The presence of a baby attracts problems." Emily put a protective hand on the stroller. "Karen, this is ridiculous. We're just taking a walk." But Karen wasn't listening. Her breathing was getting heavier, her face tense. She glared at the stroller like it wasn't a baby inside, but something she feared. Something she wanted gone. "You need to turn around," she hissed. "Now." A few neighbors peeked from their windows, but no one came out. No one intervened. In neighborhoods like ours, people were friendly only as long as they weren't involved. I stepped forward politely. "Karen, we're not doing this. Let us pass." Her expression twisted, confusion mixed with rage. "You think you can defy me? After everything I've done for this neighborhood? You mean terrorizing everyone?" I muttered under my breath. She jolted, like she took the words as a physical hit. Then she did something that made Emily grab my arm. She reached into her pocket. Emily froze. I froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. Karen's hand trembled as she pulled something out. Not a gun, not yet, but a bullet. A single brass round resting in her shaking palm. "See this?" she said, her voice cracking. "This is what happens when rules aren't followed." Emily clutched Noah's stroller and backed up. "Karen, what are you doing with that?" Karen's lips trembled. "Protecting my property. Protecting all of us." I stepped between her and Emily. "Karen, listen to me. Put that away. This isn't." She snapped again. "Don't tell me what to do." Her voice echoed down the street. A dog started barking. A door quickly closed somewhere. But Karen didn't care. Her breathing was uneven, her eyes wild. "If you won't follow the rules, I'll make you." Then she turned around and stormed back toward her house. Emily grabbed my arm. "We need to leave. Now." But before we could move, before we could escape, before we could even take a breath, we heard the metal click of a gun being cocked, and that peaceful morning shattered into a nightmare. The moment we heard that chilling click, the world around us seemed to collapse into fragments of sound and fear. Emily stiffened, her fingers tightening around the stroller handle, eyes wide with maternal instinct. I felt my chest hollow out, like all the air had vanished at once. Every muscle in my body tensed, because that sound, that metallic trigger setting, wasn't something you misheard. It was intentional. It was a warning. Emily whispered, She wouldn't actually, but even she didn't believe her own words. I turned toward Karen's house. The front door, hadn't fully closed behind her. It hung open like a gaping mouth, ready to spit venom. Through the crack, I could see her silhouette, jerky movements, pacing, mumbling to herself. Something about the way she moved told me we weren't dealing with a normal HOA tantrum. We were dealing with something deeper, something unhinged. A neighbor across the street, Mr. Baker, peeked from behind his window. He didn't open it, didn't step out, just watched, his eyes wide, his hand frozen on the curtain. He knew something was wrong, too. But fear is powerful. Fear locks knees and tongues. I leaned into Emily. We should go back home. But before we could take 3 steps, Karen charged out of her doorway. Only this time she wasn't holding a piece of paper or a bullet. She was holding a gun. A real one. Black. Heavy. Gripped like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Emily gasped and instinctively pulled the stroller behind her. Karen, what are you doing? Karen aimed not at me, not at Emily, but straight at the stroller. At my baby. Her voice was manic, shaking, almost pleading. You brought danger into this neighborhood. Don't you understand? Babies attract accidents. They bring chaos. She pressed a shaking finger to the trigger. I have to protect us. I stepped forward, hands raised. Karen, put the gun down. Whatever you think is happening, it's not real. You're scaring everyone. Her eyes darted wildly, unfocused and glassy. IT is real. I saw the signs. I saw the warning. What warning? Emily asked, terrified but steady. Karen swallowed hard. The dreams, the visions. A baby crying. A disaster coming. A fire. Noise. Screams. This, she gestured to my sleeping son, this is how it starts. I'm preventing tragedy. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just paranoid, she was delusional. And delusional people with guns, that was a nightmare no training, no HOA rulebook, no neighborhood watch meeting could prepare you for. Emily's voice trembled but stayed firm. Karen, please. He's just a baby. He's not a sign of anything. But Karen shook her head violently. No, you don't know what I've seen. I'm saving you. Suddenly, Mrs. Lawrence stepped out onto her porch, clutching her gardening gloves. Karen, honey, put that thing away. This isn't you. Karen spun around and pointed the gun at her next. Go inside. I said go inside. Mrs. Lawrence froze, her frail hands raised. Tears welled in her eyes before she slowly backed into her house and shut the door. No one else dared come out. The street was silent except for Karen's ragged breathing and the whimper of a baby starting to stir. Noah began to cry. The moment Karen heard it, something snapped inside her. Her eyes widened. Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened on the trigger. No, the sound just like the dream. And oh! I moved faster than I'd ever moved in my life. I grabbed the stroller and yanked it backward, my body shielding Emily and Noah. Karen screamed. A primal, unhinged sound that didn't belong in the real world. Stop running. I have to do this. It's for all of us. She raised the gun again. Emily grabbed my arm, whispering frantically, She's gone crazy. She's actually crazy. But then something unexpected happened. Karen didn't shoot. Not yet. Instead, she lowered the gun and pointed it to the ground, pacing in frantic circles like a caged animal. No, no, no. I need proof. I need to make them understand. She turned abruptly and marched toward the HOA office shed, the tiny wooden structure next to the mailboxes. We watched her yank open the door and dig through drawers, throwing papers everywhere until she found a large binder labeled Community Safety Protocols. She marched back toward us with it flapping in her hand. You want proof? She screamed at no one and everyone. Here, it's written. Babies under 1 year old must be regulated for safety. Section 14C? C. Emily whispered, Section 14? That doesn't even exist. I nodded. She's not reading reality. She's reading her own fear. Karen slapped the binder onto the sidewalk, flipping pages wildly. It was here. I saw it. I read it. Someone change it. She looked up at me suddenly, eyes blazing. You changed it, didn't you? You hid the truth. I shook my head. Karen, please. But she didn't let me finish. Instead, she reached into the binder and pulled something out. Another bullet. A spare round. Then another. And another. She lined them up on the sidewalk like trophies, her fingers shaking violently. You left me no choice, she whispered. The neighborhood's safety is my responsibility. I've warned you. I've given signs. I've tried everything. She picked up the gun again and pointed it at the stroller. Her voice cracked. Now, I end it. Before I could move, before I could yell, before Emily could shield Noah, Karen fired. The explosion of the gunshot ripped through the air like a tear in reality itself. Neighbors screamed from behind closed doors. Car alarms went off. The bullet tore past the stroller, so close it grazed the fabric, leaving a smoking hole. Noah shrieked in terror. Emily collapsed to her knees, clutching him. I felt something inside me die and resurrect in rage at the same time. Karen stood frozen, shocked she had actually pulled the trigger. Her mouth trembled, her eyes flickering between regret and hysteria. I didn't mean... But then, slowly, her expression hardened again. The madness settled back in, and she lifted the gun again, this time with both hands. Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. I have to finish it. And that was the moment my wife stepped forward, calm, deadly calm, the calm of someone trained to face gunfire. And everything in the story changed forever. The world didn't move for a moment. Not the leaves, not the clouds, not the trembling breath in my throat. Time itself seemed to freeze as Karen lifted the gun again, her arms stiff, her eyes twitching with a madness that didn't belong to a suburban neighborhood, but to some dark corner of a nightmare. Emily stood in front of the stroller now, my wife, my son's shield, her body a barrier between life and death. Noah's cries echoed down the street like alarms, pulling at every instinct I had. But Emily, she didn't flinch. Her posture was calm, steady, grounded, like she had stepped into a role she knew by heart. Karen's voice cracked. Move, move. I have to stop the danger. Emily didn't move. If anything, she stepped closer, and in that split second, Karen's finger twitched on the trigger. I shouted, Emily, but she didn't back away. She whispered, I've got this. The confidence in her voice made Karen hesitate, just long enough for Emily to analyze everything. Because while the rest of us saw chaos, she saw angles, trajectories, stances, and timing. She saw things the way only someone trained in life-or-death combat could. Karen didn't notice the shift. She didn't see Emily's breathing slow, her feet position themselves, her eyes lock on the barrel with a sniper trainer's unshakable focus. Instead, Karen screamed, Don't make me do this. And she fired again. The gun's explosion thundered through the cul-de-sac. This time, the bullet didn't graze the stroller. This time, it came straight at us. I watched it, a glint of brass, a streak in the air. For a fraction of a second that felt like a lifetime, Emily reacted faster than human reflex. She grabbed the stroller, shoved it to the side, and twisted her body, just enough that the bullet whizzed past her shoulder instead of piercing straight into her chest. It slammed into the brick wall behind us, chips flying onto the pavement. Neighbors screamed from behind locked doors. A few ducked behind their cars. One man shouted, Call 911, but didn't dare step outside. Karen staggered backward, horrified at her own shot. Her voice cracked into a childlike panic. No, that wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to hit you. I just wanted to scare you. I just wanted to stop the danger. Emily's eyes locked on hers, cold, sharp, trained. Drop the gun. Her voice wasn't shaky anymore. It was commanding, authoritative, a tone I had only heard once years ago when she intervened in a violent incident at a store. The tone she used when she saved a stranger's life. But Karen only tightened her grip and aimed again, this time directly at Emily. Her breathing was erratic. Her hands trembled. Her pupils were blown wide with fear and delusion. You're the danger, she shrieked. You brought the baby. You brought the chaos. Karen, Emily said slowly. "If you fire one more time, I promise you, you will regret it for the rest of your life." I felt a chill crawl up my spine, because Emily was no longer acting like a mother or a wife. She was handling an armed threat the way she had been trained to, the way she had trained others to handle threats. Karen blinked rapidly, confused. What does that mean? You can't threaten me. I'm HOA. Emily actually exhaled a short, humorless laugh. You think the HOA gives you power against a sniper instructor? The words sliced through the air. Karen froze. Her gun wavered. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because that was the first time she truly realized Emily wasn't the type of woman she could bully. She wasn't the type who cowered. She wasn't the type who pleaded. Emily was the type who ended threats. Before Karen could process that, Noah let out another terrified wail. And that sound, that innocent, trembling cry, sent Karen spiraling again. She snapped the gun upward. No, not again. The crying. The crying is the sign. It has to stop. And she pulled the trigger. For the third time. This time the bullet was aimed to kill. Emily didn't step aside. She didn't run. She didn't shield herself. She did something I never saw coming. Something that changed everything. In one lightning-fast motion, Emily lunged forward, grabbed Karen's wrist, twisted it at a precise angle, and struck her elbow with her other hand, all in one fluid motion. The gunshot went off, but the bullet fired into the asphalt instead of our son. Sparks flew. Smoke rose. Karen screamed as the gun clattered out of her hand and skidded across the pavement. Emily kicked it away with surgical precision. Karen stumbled backward, clutching her wrist, eyes wide with a mix of pain and disbelief. You attacked me." Emily stepped closer, her voice low, dangerous. "You fired a bullet at my infant. That wasn't an attack. This is a warning." Karen's breathing turned into panicked gasps. She looked around desperately, as if hoping someone, anyone, would come defend her. But every curtain was closed, every door locked. No one was coming to save her. She tried to back away, but Emily matched her step for step. "You don't get to hide behind your HOA badge," Emily said quietly. "You pointed a gun at a baby." Karen's voice cracked. I didn't mean I wasn't the voices, the dream, the message." Emily cut her off. "You almost killed him." Karen shook her head violently, her hair whipping around her face. "I was protecting everyone. I saw the disaster. The baby brings danger." Emily's expression didn't change. "Look around. You brought danger today, not him." Karen collapsed to her knees, rocking back and forth. I didn't want to, they told me. Her voice disintegrated into sobs. And as she broke down, Emily turned to me. For the first time since the chaos began, her face softened, just for a moment. "Take Noah inside," she whispered. "Now." I nodded, heart pounding, still shaking from everything that had happened. I grabbed the stroller and backed away. Behind me, I heard police sirens beginning to echo from the distance. Neighbors finally stepped outside, whispering, filming, staring in shock. But I didn't look back. All I cared about was getting my family safe. And as I pushed the stroller toward our home, one chilling thought lodged itself in my mind. This wasn't over. Karen hadn't acted out of simple rage. There was something deeper, something twisted behind her obsession. And the truth behind it would shake us more than the bullets ever could. Sirens screamed through the neighborhood, bouncing off rooftops and rattling window panes. But Emily didn't flinch. She stood over Karen, not like a vigilante, not like a frightened mother, but like a professional who had just neutralized a threat with precision, discipline, and absolute control. The same woman who rocked a newborn to sleep an hour ago now stood with the posture of someone who'd spent years training soldiers to survive ambushes. Neighbors peeked out from behind fences and windows, whispering in disbelief. They weren't just looking at Karen, the deranged woman sitting on the curb, rocking back and forth. They were looking at Emily, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. As I pushed Noah's stroller toward our porch, I glanced back. Emily wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The police cruiser screeched to a halt, and two officers jumped out, one with his hand on his weapon, the other holding a radio. "Step back," one of them shouted at Emily. She raised her hands, palms open, not scared, compliant, respectful. But her eyes stayed locked on Karen, analyzing her body language the way a trainer evaluates recruits under stress. "She's unarmed," Emily said calmly. "The weapon is 10 feet to your right. Slide it back with your foot before you approach." The officer hesitated, then did exactly what she said. The second officer, a tall man with a stern jaw, approached cautiously. "What happened here?" Emily didn't answer immediately. She kept staring at Karen, watching her breathing, her hand movements, her gaze. Only when she was satisfied Karen wasn't about to lunge or grab something did she turn to the officers. "She fired multiple rounds at my family," Emily said, her voice steady. 3 shots. The first 2 were warning shots, barely, but the third was intentional. She aimed to kill. Karen's voice cracked. I didn't mean to. She brought the baby." "Ma'am, stay seated," the officer instructed. Emily crossed her arms. Not defensively, but with the authority of someone who was done being threatened. The officers exchanged a glance. They noticed it too. Emily didn't panic. She didn't shake. She didn't stumble over her words. She reported the event with clean, precise detail, like she'd rehearsed the scenario 100 times. One officer finally asked, "Ma'am, your reaction time was unusually fast. You disarmed her before the third bullet fully left the chamber. How did you manage that?" Emily sighed softly. She didn't like talking about her past. It wasn't a secret, but it wasn't something she boasted about either. "I train snipers," she said simply. "Military, advanced marksmanship, threat de-escalation, tactical responses. I've been doing it for years." Silence fell, so heavy the street itself seemed to stop breathing. The officer blinked. "You train snipers?" Emily nodded. "I teach them how to fire, how to stay calm under pressure, how to react when everything goes wrong, and how to never ever miss." Karen whimpered. She attacked me first." Emily stepped 1 foot closer. "You fired 3 bullets at my infant, and the only reason you're still breathing is because I let you live." Even the officers swallowed. Her presence was commanding in a way that didn't come from ego, but from expertise, a quiet power. They sat Karen on the curb, handcuffed her wrists, and began asking basic questions. But Emily wasn't done observing her. "Her pupils are blown," Emily said. "She's dissociating. Look at her hands, they're twitching, not shaking. That's not normal panic. That's psychological distress, possible psychosis." The officers looked at her like she had just given them a cheat code to understanding the suspect. "You trained in behavioral assessment too?" the younger officer asked. "Yes," Emily said, "because a sniper's biggest enemy isn't distance. It's the human mind. If they don't understand psychology, they fail under pressure." Karen's breathing sped up. She rocked harder. No, stop talking about me. Stop looking at me. You don't know what I've seen." Emily crouched, not close enough to be in danger, but close enough to speak to her eye level. "Karen, what did you see?" Karen's voice shook. "The fire, the crash, the screaming, it's a sign. The baby brings the sign." Emily's expression softened, not with sympathy, but with recognition. "She's not lying," she whispered, turning to me and the officers. "She's delusional, not pretending. Her mind genuinely believes she's preventing a disaster." The officer nodded. "We'll request a psychological evaluation." But Emily wasn't finished. She looked back at Karen, her voice lower and more controlled. "Karen, did something happen to you before? Something with a baby? Something you couldn't control?" Karen's eyes went wide. Her lips trembled. Then she broke. Her sobs echoed across the street, louder than the earlier gunshots. "I couldn't save him. I couldn't save him. I heard the cry and then the scream and then the fire and I failed. She pressed her forehead to her knees. Emily inhaled sharply. The regret in Karen's voice, the guilt, made something click. It wasn't about the HOA. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't jealousy or control. It was trauma. Deep, untreated trauma. Emily stood slowly and stepped back toward me. Her voice softened just for me. She lost someone. A child. I see it in every word she said. I looked at her in disbelief. How do you know all that? Emily's eyes darkened, shadows from a past she didn't speak about often. I train soldiers to spot trauma responses before they become violent. I teach them to de-escalate civilians in war zones. I've seen mothers break like this. I've seen fathers lose their minds after losing children. The signs are the same. She glanced back at Karen, whose sobbing had turned into exhausted whimpers. I can't excuse what she did, Emily whispered, but I understand it now. The officers took Karen into custody. They read her rights, lifted her to her feet, and led her to the cruiser. But before they closed the door, Karen looked at Emily. Not with hatred, not with fear, but with sorrow. You saved him, she whispered. You saved him like I couldn't save mine. Emily didn't respond. She simply watched as the cruiser drove off. As the sirens faded, the neighborhood slowly came back to life. Doors opened. Neighbors stepped out. Some rushed over to ask if we were okay. Some apologized for not jumping in sooner. Some hugged Emily. But none of them truly understood who had stood between life and death that morning. Only I did. My wife wasn't just brave. She wasn't just strong. She was trained, sharper, calmer, deadlier under pressure than anyone I had ever met. And as I carried Noah inside, one thought echoed through my mind. Karen wasn't the only one with a past. My wife had a history too. A history strong enough to stop a bullet. The police cruiser disappeared around the bend, and with it went the chaos, the sirens, the tension that had wrapped the neighborhood like a steel wire. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, thick, the kind of silence that sits on your chest and forces you to replay every second of what just happened. Emily stood on the porch now, holding Noah close, gently rocking him as his cries softened. I watched her from a few steps away, still shaken, still trying to absorb the fact that my wife, my calm, gentle, soft-spoken Emily, had just disarmed a woman with a gun like it was a routine field maneuver. But as the adrenaline faded, something else seeped into the air. Something darker. Something that Emily understood long before I did. Karen's breakdown. Her words. Her screams about fire. The baby cries. The sign. It wasn't random. It was a story. A story buried inside a woman we had all spent years mocking, avoiding, dismissing as a nuisance. But now, after seeing the fear in her eyes, the kind that didn't come from anger but from memory, I realized there was something buried under her madness. Something real. Emily must have sensed what I was thinking, because she spoke before I could ask. "We need to talk," she said quietly. We went inside. I locked the door behind us, double-checked it, then pulled the curtains shut. Emily laid Noah in his crib. He clung to her finger for a moment, his tiny hand trembling. Emily kissed his forehead. Then she turned to me with an expression I rarely saw, an expression of someone who had connected dots that others couldn't even see. She wasn't trying to kill him, Emily said softly. Not at first. I stared at her. Emily, she fired 3 times. I know, she replied, but her mind wasn't seeing a baby. She was seeing a memory. I sank into a chair. What kind of memory makes someone nearly shoot a child? Emily walked over, knelt in front of me, and placed her hand on my knee. I've seen this before, she whispered. In soldiers, in refugees, in mothers who lived through war or tragedy. What did you see in her? A woman stuck in her worst moment. Emily exhaled and leaned back against the cabinet. When she kept saying the fire, and I failed him, that wasn't delusion. That was guilt. Real guilt. I rubbed my forehead. So, you think she... Yes, Emily said. She lost a child. The room tilted for a moment. The idea hit harder than I expected. All the anger I carried toward Karen, every curse, every insult, every frustration, crumbled into something more complicated, something uncomfortable. Pity. But Emily wasn't finished. You didn't see the way she froze when Noah cried, she continued. Her entire body locked up, People who lose children, especially to traumatic accidents, react like that. They relive the sound, the fear, the helplessness. Emily, I whispered, how can you be so sure? Because I've held women like her while they broke. Her voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from memory. She looked away for a moment, gathering herself. When I was overseas, I had a trainee named Rosalind. Strong, sharp, brilliant, but she froze every time she heard a child crying. We eventually learned her son had died in a house fire 2 years prior. She had tried to save him, but couldn't. The sound haunted her, controlled her. She said it was the sign of disaster. Those were her words, almost exactly like Karen's. I felt a chill crawl down my arms. So, Karen's not evil, I said slowly. She's broken. Emily nodded. Yes, but broken people can still be dangerous if they're untreated. I sank deeper into the chair, overwhelmed. And the HOA stuff? I asked. The rules? The paranoia? Emily shrugged softly. A way to create control. When you lose something as precious as a child, something you can never get back, you start overcompensating. You try to control everything else to avoid chaos. So the insane rules were her way of preventing tragedy, Emily finished, or trying to. It almost made sense now. Every insane complaint, every confrontation, every warning. She wasn't trying to ruin lives. She was trying desperately to prevent the world from hurting again. But while the truth softened the edges of my anger, it also sharpened a new fear. Emily, I whispered, what if she comes back? She won't, Emily said firmly. She'll be placed under psychiatric evaluation. They don't release someone after a violent psychotic break without treatment. I nodded, but the fear didn't fade. Emily walked over, sat beside me, and took my hand. You're thinking about Noah, she said quietly. Of course I am, I whispered. She aimed a gun at him. I know, Emily replied, and I'll never let anything like that happen again. Her words were strong, but something in her expression told me the incident had stirred something inside her too. Then she swallowed hard. Do you know why I reacted so fast? Why I didn't hesitate? I shook my head. Emily looked down. I lost someone too, she whispered. The words hit like another bullet. I stared at her. What do you mean? She didn't look up. When I was training a group of new recruits, we were ambushed. A young soldier, barely 19, was caught in crossfire. I tried to pull him out. I did everything right. Everything. But he died in my arms. She finally met my eyes. That moment never leaves you. Not ever. And the second Karen aimed at Noah, I felt that moment again. Her voice trembled, and I swore I would never lose someone like that again. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her speed, her precision, her fearlessness, her rage, her control. She wasn't just protecting her son. She was fighting a demon inside herself, a memory she refused to relive. I pulled her close, holding her as tightly as I could. You saved us, I whispered. You saved him. You saved me. Emily pressed her forehead to mine. And if I have to, I'll do it again. Outside, neighbors talked quietly in little clusters. Some cried, some whispered, some shielded their kids with trembling arms. But none of them knew what we now understood. This wasn't just an act of violence. It was a collision of trauma, two different pasts crashing violently into one moment. Karen wasn't a monster. She was a mother who never healed. And Emily wasn't just a hero. She was a warrior who had learned to live with loss. But as the truth settled between us, one more realization surfaced, a final twist neither of us expected. Karen hadn't acted alone. Something, or someone, had pushed her deeper into her delusion. Someone who would return. Someone who had fed her paranoia. Someone who was watching even now. And the real danger was only just beginning. The sun had begun to lower behind the houses, casting long shadows across the street, shadows that felt heavier now, as if the entire neighborhood carried the weight of the morning's violence. But even as the light faded, the tension didn't. Something lingered, something unfinished. I stood by the living room window, watching the quiet road outside. Neighbors huddled in small groups, whispering, their eyes darting nervously to our house, to the end of the street where the police car had taken Karen, and then back to each other. The HOA president, Mr. Thompson, paced back and forth on his lawn like he didn't know whether to knock on our door or run away from it. Emily joined me, brushing Noah's hair gently as he lay asleep in her arms, finally calm after hours of tension. "It feels too quiet," she whispered. I nodded, because something still doesn't add up. Emily turned, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "That binder," I said, thinking back to the HOA manual Karen had ripped apart in her delusion. She swore the rule was written there, and those extra bullets she had, someone gave her those. Emily frowned. "You're thinking someone fueled her paranoia. I'm thinking Karen wasn't the only one involved." Before Emily could respond, a firm knock rattled the front door. Not hesitant, not polite, authoritative. I opened it cautiously. 2 officers stood outside, one from earlier and another holding a folder. "Sir," the first one said, "we need to ask you and your wife a few more questions." Emily stepped forward, shifting Noah onto her shoulder. "Is Karen stable?" The second officer exhaled heavily. "She's in psychiatric custody, but we found something in her house." Emily and I exchanged a look. She gestured for them to come inside. The officer opened the folder. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Photos of us. Our house. Our front yard. Our car. Our baby's stroller. Even pictures taken from behind bushes, trees, mailboxes. I felt my stomach twist. She was spying on us? The officer nodded. For months, apparently. And she wasn't doing it alone. Emily stiffened. "Who else is involved?" He flipped to another page. There, taped into the corner, was a handwritten note, scrawled in shaky, all-caps writing. "They will destroy the neighborhood. Act before it's too late." Below it was a signature. Not Karen's. Councilman Reginald Hale. Emily's eyes hardened. "I know that name." I did too. He wasn't just a councilman, he was the district's most vocal anti-change, official, known for extreme, old-fashioned control over community development. But the officer wasn't done. He turned another page. Karen was attending weekly neighborhood safety meetings, privately run by him. He filled her head with paranoia, told her that new families bring crime, that young parents bring danger, that infants are accident magnets. He convinced her every cry was a warning. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. He manipulated her trauma. Emily's jaw locked. He weaponized it. No wonder she was so obsessed. No wonder she created imaginary rules. No wonder she spiraled into madness. She wasn't alone in her delusional fear. She had been groomed into it. The officer continued. "Hale is currently being investigated, but he's very influential, so it may take time." Emily stepped closer, her voice low, controlled, dangerous. "What about our safety?" "We're assigning extra patrols to your block for now," he said, "but stay cautious." Emily nodded, but her eyes were calculating, measuring threats, analyzing angles. She wasn't taking chances. When the officers left, the house fell silent again. Emily walked to the kitchen, placed Noah in his crib, and leaned heavily on the counter. For the first time all day, she looked tired. I wrapped my arms around her from behind. "We're safe," I whispered. "You saved us." But Emily shook her head slowly. This wasn't just a random attack. This was manipulation. A vulnerable woman was turned into a weapon. I kissed her shoulder. "And you disarmed that weapon." Emily turned around, eyes softening. "He almost cost a baby's life. He almost pushed Karen into killing someone. He almost tore families apart with his lies." I nodded. "So, what do we do?" Her voice strengthened. "We tell the truth." That night, Emily and I walked outside. The entire neighborhood gathered. Dozens of families standing together, unsure, shaken, seeking answers. They looked to me, then to Emily, then back to me. I took a deep breath. Karen didn't act alone, I said. She was manipulated, fed paranoia, fed fear, fed lies. Someone used her trauma against her. And today, that nearly cost my son his life. Whispers spread like wildfire. Faces shifted, shock, guilt, fear. Emily stepped forward, holding Noah in her arms. The porch light cast a soft halo around her, making her look less like a sniper instructor and more like a guardian. She saw our baby as danger, Emily said, not because she was evil, but because she was hurting. And someone exploited that pain. Mothers placed hands over their hearts. Fathers clenched fists. Even teenagers lowered their eyes. Emily continued, voice steady and warm. We can't undo what happened, but we can make sure it never happens again. We take care of each other. We watch out for the vulnerable. We don't dismiss people like Karen. We help them heal. Her tone softened even more. And we protect our families not with paranoia but with community. Something shifted in the crowd. A sense of unity born from fear but shaped by truth. One neighbor stepped forward. We're with you, he said. All of us. Others followed. Nods. Hands on shoulders. Tears. Solidarity. For the first time since the gunshots, I felt the neighborhood breathe again. Emily looked at me, quietly triumphant. We're safe now, she whispered. Truly. I kissed her forehead. Because of you. She shook her head, gently. No, because we faced the truth. Together. As we went back inside, I carried Noah to his room, watching his small chest rise and fall with innocent peace. Emily stood beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're mothers with a past, warriors with wounds, women who refuse to let fear win. Karen would get help. The councilman would face justice. And our family, we would heal. But the message of that day, that no trauma should ever be ignored, would stay with us forever. Thank you so much for staying with me through this powerful, emotional journey. Before you go, I want to know something important. Which city are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments right now. I love seeing where my amazing viewers across the USA are tuning in from. If this story moved you, inspired you, or kept you on the edge of your seat, then hit that like button and make sure you subscribe for more real-life justice, emotional twists, and powerful family stories just like this one. Your support helps this channel grow, and it means the world to me. See you in the next story.